We all need a place where our hearts can breathe at. This is where broken hearts heal, courage is born, and silence finds a voice. Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's a moment in every painful cycle, whether it's toxic relationships, self-sabotaging habits, or a shame spiral, when you feel like you've been here before. Same fight, same heartbreak, same regret. And somewhere deep down you whisper to yourself, I can't do this again. There's a strange comfort in telling ourselves, this is just life. We say it when the same heartbreak knocks on our door for the 5th time. We say it when the same toxic dynamic plays out in yet another friendship or relationship. We say it when we wake up one morning and realize that despite all our intentions, nothing has changed. We're in the same place, just older, more tired, and a little more cynical. I know what it's like to normalize pain because naming it feels too big. If I don't name it, then I can still pretend it's just bad luck. I can still say, maybe next time will be different. I can still hope without having to act. But here's the thing, every cycle that has ever held me hostage had one thing in common. It stayed hidden as long as I stayed silent. Naming the pattern out loud is terrifying. It's like suddenly turning the lights on in a room you've been sitting in for years. You see the dust, the cobwebs, the peeling wallpaper, and you can't unsee it. It's why most of us would rather keep the lights dim. We think ignorance will protect us, but really, it keeps us bound. I remember a conversation I had with a woman after a talk I gave. She was shaking as she spoke. She told me she had just ended her 3rd relationship in a row with a man who belittled her, controlled her, and made her feel small. She said, I keep picking the wrong people. I don't know why this keeps happening to me. I asked her a simple question. What if it's not bad luck? What if it's a pattern? Her eyes filled with tears, not because she didn't know, but because she did. The moment you name a pattern, you're forced to face the reality that it's not random. And if it's not random, that means there's something inside you that needs healing. Something drawing you back to the same pain. That realization hurts, but it's also the first real step toward freedom. Sometimes, we confuse self-awareness with self-condemnation. We think that naming a pattern means admitting we're broken. But naming a pattern is not about shame, it's about clarity. And clarity is the most compassionate gift you can give yourself. When you name it, you can finally see it for what it is. That job you've changed 4 times in 5 years because every workplace just wasn't right. Maybe it's not about the jobs. It's about an unhealed fear of authority or an old wound of never feeling valued. That friendship that feels one-sided every single time, maybe it's not about finding better people. Maybe it's about finally believing you're worth being chosen. But here's where it gets tricky. Naming the pattern means you can't unknow it. It means you lose the ability to hide behind, I didn't realize. And that's uncomfortable. I've learned that one reason we don't name our patterns is because the moment we do, the clock starts ticking. We either change, or we live with the heavy awareness that we're choosing the same pain on purpose. And that's a hard truth to swallow. Let me give you an image. Imagine you're standing in a field, and every few weeks, a storm rolls in from the same direction. The first few times you think, wow, what bad weather. But after years of storms, you finally climb a hill, look out into the distance, and realize there's a broken dam upstream. The water isn't random. It's coming from the same source every time. You can keep standing in the field, acting surprised, or you can start making a plan to move. That's what naming the pattern does. It takes you up the hill so you can see the dam. And once you see it, you can't go back to thinking the storms are fate. There's also a deep vulnerability in naming the pattern out loud to someone else. Because when you say it in your own head, you can still twist it, soften it, make it sound less urgent. But when you look someone in the eye and say, I have a pattern of staying in relationships where I'm not respected, or I keep sabotaging opportunities because I'm afraid of being seen, it becomes real. Spoken words of weight. They stop floating around like half-formed thoughts and land like stones in the middle of your life. And here's the other thing, when you name it out loud, you also give others permission to hold you accountable. That's both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because you don't have to fight the cycle alone. Terrifying because now someone else knows, and they might gently call you out when you start slipping back into it. But here's what I promise you, no pattern can survive being named consistently and honestly. Shame thrives in secrecy, and most cycles are just shame playing dress up as normal. The moment you drag it into the light, it loses its costume. If you're afraid to name your pattern because you think it will make you weak, I want you to flip that belief on its head. The truth is, the strongest people I've ever met are the ones who have stood in front of the mirror and said, "I'm not going to lie to myself anymore." They don't sugarcoat it. They don't dress it up. They tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it makes their knees shake. And I want you to know that naming the pattern is not the same as blaming yourself. It's not about taking on all the guilt and responsibility. It's about acknowledging that while you can't always control what happens to you, you do get to choose whether you keep living in the same story. You might be thinking, but if I name it, then I have to do something about it. And what if I fail? I get it. Change is messy. There's no clean, easy path out of a painful cycle. But here's the thing, failing while trying to break free is still progress. Because each attempt weakens the pattern's grip. Each attempt teaches you something new about yourself. One day, you'll look back and realize that the moment you first named it was the moment the ending began. It may have taken months or years, or 100 tries, but that first brave act of calling it out was the seed. And seeds don't bloom overnight, but they grow roots the moment they're planted. So I want you to ask yourself right now, what's the cycle that keeps showing up in your life? And are you willing to look it in the eye and say, "I see you"? Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Right now. Because the truth is, there is no ready. There is only the moment you decide you're done pretending you don't notice. And when you finally speak it, when you drag it into the light, you're no longer just surviving inside of it. You've started breaking it. And that's where everything changes. Every painful cycle has a root. We might think the pattern is the problem, but most of the time, the pattern is just the surface symptom. The real problem is buried underneath, quiet but powerful, like the unseen roots of a tree that keep producing the same bitter fruit, no matter how many times you pluck it away. Here's what I've learned the hard way: cycles are not random repetitions. They are echoes. They come from something in our past that was too big, too painful, or too complicated for us to fully process at the time. And because it was never dealt with, it keeps bleeding into our present, shaping the people we choose, the risks we take, the way we react when things get hard. I remember sitting with a friend who couldn't understand why she kept falling for people who eventually abandoned her. She was smart, grounded, and capable in every other part of her life. But in love, she was drawn to people who, from the outside, seemed unreliable from the start. When we dug deeper, she realized she had spent her entire childhood trying to earn the attention of a parent who was physically present but emotionally absent. That wound, never feeling fully chosen, had been quietly steering her choices for decades. Here's the thing about unhealed wounds: they don't just sit quietly in the past. They shape the way we see ourselves. They alter our definitions of normal. They influence the kind of love, respect, and opportunities we think we deserve. You can leave the person, the job, or the environment that's hurting you. But if the wound is still open, the pain will find another way back in. That's why finding the wound beneath the pattern is so crucial. If you don't, you end up fighting shadows, removing the visible problem, but leaving the source untouched. It's like pulling the weeds in your garden without removing the roots. For a few weeks, the ground looks clean, but before long, the same weeds push through again, stronger than before. Finding the wound isn't easy because most of us have spent years, sometimes decades, covering it up. We've built elaborate coping mechanisms around it. We've learned how to avoid situations that poke at it. We've distracted ourselves with business, perfectionism, people-pleasing, or even numbness. But covering a wound doesn't heal it. It just delays the healing. One of the reasons we resist looking for the wound is because we're afraid of what we'll find. We think that if we go back there, if we touch that raw place, we'll fall apart. We tell ourselves, I've made it this far without opening that box. So why now? But here's the truth, you're already carrying it. You've been carrying it for years. The weight you feel in your chest, the heaviness you can't quite explain. That's the wound, and it's already shaping you. Facing it won't make it heavier. It will finally give you a chance to set it down. And sometimes the wound isn't a single traumatic event. Sometimes it's a slow erosion. It's the years of being overlooked, the constant pressure to be perfect to earn love, the subtle but relentless message that who you are isn't enough. These wounds are harder to recognize because they're not marked by one moment. They're marked by a lifetime of repetition. But they're just as powerful, and they can keep us trapped in cycles that feel impossible to break. I once worked with someone who realized her cycle of overworking wasn't just about ambition. It was about a wound left over from years of being told she had to be exceptional to be worthy of attention. Even after she achieved more than most people dreamed of, she still couldn't stop. She wasn't chasing success, she was chasing worthiness. And until she saw that wound for what it was, no amount of rest, meditation, or vacation could change the pattern. The process of finding the wound starts with curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" try asking, "What is this trying to tell me about me?" Instead of focusing only on what's happening now, ask yourself, "Where have I felt this before? When was the first time I remember feeling this way?" Those questions can take you back, not to punish you, but to reveal the root. When you find the wound, you might feel anger. Anger at the person who caused it. Anger at yourself for not seeing it sooner. Anger at the years you lost to it. That's normal. That's part of the grieving process for the life you might have had if the wound wasn't there. Let yourself feel that. Let yourself mourn. But don't stay there forever. Because the point of finding the wound isn't to keep reliving it. It's to finally give it the care it never received. Care might mean therapy. It might mean forgiveness, not for the sake of the other person, but for your own release. It might mean rewriting the story you've been telling yourself about what happened and what it says about you. The wound doesn't have to define you. It's part of your history, not your identity. When you tend to the wound, the pattern begins to lose its pull. The same situations that used to feel magnetic start to feel wrong. The same people who once seemed familiar and comfortable now seem draining. That's when you know you're healing, not because the past has changed, but because your relationship to it has. And here's the most beautiful part. When you do the work of finding and healing the wound, you not only break the cycle for yourself, you break it for everyone who comes after you. Whether that's your children, your friends, or anyone who looks to you for guidance, they'll inherit your healing instead of your pain. I want you to remember something. Finding the wound beneath the pattern is not about going backward. It's about freeing your future from a past that's been quietly writing your story. You can't change what happened, but you can choose how much power it has over what happens next. So when you notice the pattern repeating, again, don't just get frustrated at the surface. Pause. Get curious. Ask yourself, what is this really about? What is it touching inside me? And when you find the answer, don't turn away. Sit with it. Listen to it. That's where the cycle starts to lose its hold. Because the truth is, the cycle isn't just the bad relationship, the overwork, the self-sabotage, or the avoidance. The cycle is the unhealed wound asking to be seen. And once you see it, really see it, you can finally stop living in reaction to it and start building a life that isn't defined by it. There's a point in every painful cycle where we make an unspoken deal with our suffering. We wouldn't call it that, of course. We wouldn't stand up and say, "I agree to live with this forever." But somewhere, deep in our subconscious, a quiet voice whispers, "If I accept this as normal, at least I won't be surprised when it happens again." It's a survival tactic. We convince ourselves that the devil we know is safer than the uncertainty we don't. So we learn to live with the sharp edges, with the constant ache, with the unkind words, the lonely nights, the self-criticism. We call it coping, but really, it's surrender. Not the freeing kind, but the kind that chains you to the same hurt over and over again. I remember working with a woman who had been in the same toxic work environment for over a decade. Every morning, she would drive to the office, take a deep breath in the parking lot, and brace herself for the day ahead. She knew the culture was unhealthy. She knew her boss was manipulative. But she stayed, not because she liked it, but because she had convinced herself, at least I know what to expect here. I know how to survive this. That's the hidden cost of these agreements we make with our pain. They give us predictability in exchange for possibility. They make us feel in control in the smallest sense, while robbing us of the life we could be living. And here's what's so tricky about it. Breaking that agreement often feels more terrifying than staying in it. Because to break it, you have to step into the unknown. You have to risk being wrong about what's out there. You have to trust that you're strong enough to handle whatever comes next, even though you've been telling yourself for years that you're not. We stay in the familiar pain because, in some strange way, it feels like home. And home, no matter how broken, feels safer than walking into a wilderness we've never seen before. But here's the hard truth. If the place you call home is slowly killing your spirit, it's not home, it's a cage. Breaking the agreement you made with your pain means finally admitting that you've been settling for survival when you were made for more. It means deciding that the cost of staying is higher than the cost of leaving, even if leaving means walking straight into uncertainty. When I talk about this, people often say, "But what if I leave and it's worse?" And I always say, what if you stay and it never gets better? Because here's the thing, the only thing guaranteed about staying in a painful cycle is that you'll keep living it. When you break that agreement, it's not going to feel like freedom at first. It will feel like loss. Loss of what's familiar. Loss of the little coping rituals you built to get through the day. Loss of the identity you built around surviving this particular pain. That's why so many people step out of the cycle, get scared, and run back in. It's not because the pain got better, it's because the comfort of familiarity felt easier than the discomfort of growth. But every time you go back, the agreement grows stronger. It becomes harder to believe you can live without it. You start telling yourself stories like, maybe I'm not meant for better, or maybe this is just who I am. That's not truth. It's conditioning. It's what happens when you've been in the cycle so long that you forget life can feel any other way. Here's what I want you to hear. Breaking the agreement is not about being reckless. It's about being honest. Honest about what this cycle is costing you. Honest about how small it's making you live. Honest about the ways you've convinced yourself you don't deserve more because more feels uncertain. One of the most powerful things I've seen happen in people's lives is when they finally say, I don't have to accept this anymore. Sometimes they say it quietly, like a whisper they're afraid to believe. Sometimes they shout it like a war cry. But in that moment, something shifts. It's not that the cycle ends instantly, cycles rarely do. It's that a door opens inside them. And once that door is open, the idea of going back to the old agreement feels impossible. You might be wondering, what if breaking the agreement costs me something big? What if I lose the relationship, the job, the community? And the truth is, you might. But here's the thing, you're already losing something by staying. You're losing yourself, piece by piece, day by day. And no job, no relationship, no sense of belonging is worth that cost. Breaking the agreement doesn't mean you stop feeling afraid. It means you stop letting fear be the thing that decides your future. It means you let hope have at least an equal vote. It means you're willing to stand in that terrifying in-between space where the old pain is gone, but the new life hasn't fully arrived yet. And trust that it will be worth it. When I think about the agreements I've broken with my own pain, I remember how shaky I felt at first. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was walking barefoot through a storm. But every step I took away from the old cycle taught me something, that I could survive without it, that I could breathe in open air, that my life could feel light again. There's something you need to know: your pain will try to bargain with you. It will whisper, "Come back. It's safer here. You know how to survive here." And for a moment, you might believe it. But I want you to pause and ask yourself, do I want to survive, or do I want to live? Because the two are not the same. Survival keeps you breathing. Living makes you come alive. And you cannot live fully if you are still bound by an agreement to keep hurting in ways you don't have to. So if you've been living with that quiet contract, if you've been telling yourself that staying in the pain is the only way to stay safe, I want you to know that you can tear it up. You can choose uncertainty over misery. You can choose the wilderness over the cage. And you can choose yourself over the fear of what comes next. The moment you break that agreement, you open the door to a different kind of life. A life where you're not defined by what you've survived, but by what you've created. And while that step might feel like the scariest thing you've ever done, it will also be the beginning of the most honest, courageous chapter of your story. Ending a painful cycle is never just about stopping something. It's about replacing it with something that gives life instead of taking it away. The biggest mistake we make when we finally walk away from the thing that's been hurting us is thinking that absence alone will heal us. We think, if I just quit this job, I'll feel free. If I just leave this relationship, I'll feel whole. If I just stop this habit, I'll be okay. And for a while, that empty space feels like relief. But relief is not the same as restoration. If you've ever cleaned out a closet, you know that an empty shelf doesn't stay empty for long. Something always finds its way into the space. Our lives are the same way. When we remove something that has been part of our daily existence, even if it's harmful, we leave behind a gap. And gaps don't stay gaps. If we're not intentional, the space will be filled by something just as unhealthy as what we got rid of, because our patterns tend to find their way back unless we actively create new ones. That's why replacing is so important. It's not about simply taking the pain out. It's about planting something new in its place. You can't just remove fear. You have to replace it with faith. You can't just remove chaos. You have to replace it with peace. You can't just remove isolation. You have to replace it with connection. Otherwise, the moment life gets hard again, you'll run back to what feels familiar, even if it's harmful, because the human heart will always reach for something to hold on to. I remember talking to a man who had finally broken free from a long cycle of unhealthy relationships. He told me, "I feel lighter, but I also feel lost." He wasn't going back to the toxic relationship, but he didn't know what to do with the emptiness it left behind. So he started filling his time with work. Lots of work. At first, it looked like productivity, but really, it was just another way to avoid the loneliness he didn't want to face. The cycle had shifted shape, but the wound was still in control. Replacing doesn't mean just swapping one distraction for another. It means asking yourself, what do I want to grow here? What will actually nourish me instead of numb me? It's about choosing something that aligns with who you want to become, not just what feels easy in the moment. This is where intentionality matters more than willpower. Willpower will help you say no to the old thing, but intention will guide you to the new thing that will sustain you. For example, if you've left a workplace that burned you out, replacing doesn't just mean finding another job. It means creating rhythms that honor your limits, finding work that aligns with your values, surrounding yourself with colleagues who inspire you instead of drain you. If you've ended a relationship that made you feel small, replacing doesn't mean just jumping into another romance. It means building a life where you feel whole without needing someone else to complete you. The truth is, the mind doesn't like empty spaces. The moment something leaves, we instinctively want to fill it. But there's a difference between filling the space and cultivating it. Filling is about speed, grabbing whatever's closest to stop the discomfort. Cultivating is about patience, taking the time to choose what will grow well there. Cultivating requires you to be uncomfortable for a while, to sit in the quiet, to resist the urge to rush back into the first thing that feels familiar. One of the bravest things you can do is give yourself permission to not fill the space right away. It's counterintuitive, but that breathing room is where you learn who you are without the old cycle. And the clearer you become on that, the better choices you'll make about what to invite in next. Replacing also means redefining what normal feels like. If you've lived with chaos, calm might feel boring at first. If you've lived with constant criticism, kindness might feel suspicious. If you've lived with scarcity, abundance might feel overwhelming. That's why the replacement phase can be so disorienting. You're not just learning to live without the pain, you're learning to trust that something better can last. And here's the hard part: the healthier choice often won't feel natural right away. That's because what's natural to you is what's familiar. And what's familiar has been shaped by the cycle you just left. You'll have to train yourself to recognize healthy as safe, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Think of it like moving to a new city after living in the same neighborhood for years. At first, you keep instinctively taking the old routes, even when they don't lead anywhere. You have to retrain your mind to navigate the new streets. Replacing a painful cycle is like that. You're building a new internal map. And here's where grace comes in: you're going to mess up. You're going to take a wrong turn. You might find yourself halfway back into an old habit before you even realize it. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. The key is to notice it quickly, turn around, and get back on the new path. One of the most powerful ways to replace is to surround yourself with people, places, and practices that reinforce your new direction. If you've left behind relationships that thrived on drama, seek out friends who value peace. If you've stopped overworking, spend time with people who encourage rest. If you've stepped away from constant criticism, immerse yourself in spaces that speak life into you. We are shaped by what we're around, so be intentional about choosing environments that align with the person you're becoming. Replacing also means building rituals that anchor you: morning walks, journaling, prayer or meditation, weekly check-ins with a trusted friend. These aren't just feel-good activities, they're reminders that you're actively tending to the new life you're creating. And the more you tend to it, the less appealing the old cycle becomes. I want you to think of replacing like planting a garden where something toxic used to grow. You can pull out the weeds, but if you don't plant something new, the weeds will eventually come back. But if you plant something healthy, nurture it, and protect it, the soil will change. Over time, it will become a place where the old weeds simply can't thrive anymore. Ending a painful cycle is courageous. But replacing what you've removed is where transformation happens. This is the stage where you move from just breaking free to building something beautiful. It's the difference between escaping the prison and creating a home. So don't just walk away from what's been hurting you. Walk toward what will heal you. Fill the empty space with intention, with love, with purpose. Because when you replace the pain with something that gives life, you're not just ending a cycle. You're building a future that has no place for it to return. The final step in ending a painful cycle is not just walking away from what hurt you. It's protecting the new version of yourself you've fought so hard to become. Healing isn't only about feeling better. It's about guarding that healing so you don't slip back into the same patterns that once defined you. Because cycles have a way of knocking on the door again. Sometimes they come disguised as different people, different opportunities, different circumstances. But if you're not careful, they carry the same energy as the thing you just escaped. That's why your healing must become your boundary. Not a wall that shuts everyone out, but a gate that decides what gets in and what stays out. A gate you keep locked when danger comes near and open when goodness approaches. And here's the thing. When you've been in a painful cycle for a long time, boundaries will feel strange at first. They will feel selfish. They will feel like you're being too much. That's because you've been conditioned to believe that your worth comes from accommodating others, even at the expense of your own peace. I remember a man who told me he'd finally ended a decades-long cycle of saying yes to everyone. Every family member, every coworker, every friend who needed something. He was there, even when it cost him sleep, money, and health. When he finally started saying no, people were shocked. Some even got angry. And for a while, he almost gave in and went back to his old ways because the guilt was so loud. But then he realized something. Every time he said yes to something that violated his peace, he was saying no to himself. And he had promised himself he wouldn't do that anymore. That's what it means to let your healing become your boundary. You stop making decisions based on guilt, fear, or habit. You start making them based on the person you're becoming. If something threatens your peace, drains your energy, or reopens an old wound, You don't justify it anymore. You protect yourself from it. And I'll be honest with you, people will notice when you change. The ones who benefited from your lack of boundaries will feel it the most. They might try to pull you back. They might say, "You've changed," as if it's a bad thing. And you'll have to be strong enough to respond, "Yes, I have, and I'm not going back." This is where many people unintentionally return to old cycles, because they start to mistake discomfort for danger. The discomfort of saying no, the discomfort of letting someone be disappointed in you, the discomfort of choosing rest over productivity. These feelings can trick you into thinking you're doing something wrong. But discomfort is not danger, it's growth. You have to remind yourself, you didn't go through all that healing just to hand it back at the first sign of pressure. You didn't do all that work just to prove to people that you can still play the same role you used to play in their lives. You healed so you could live differently. And that means sometimes your boundaries will cost you relationships. Not because you don't care, but because some relationships were built entirely on your lack of boundaries. Once you change the rules, those relationships can't survive in the same form. That's painful, but it's also a form of protection. If someone can only stay connected to you by hurting you, that's not love. That's dependency. One of the most important shifts that happens when you let your healing become your boundary is that you stop needing to explain yourself to everyone. You realize that "no" is a full sentence, that protecting your peace doesn't require a PowerPoint presentation or a long justification. You get to choose what enters your life simply because it's your life. But here's something else to keep in mind. Boundaries aren't just about keeping things out. They're also about letting the right things in. If your healing has made you cautious, you might start shutting out people or opportunities that are actually good for you. The gate swings both ways, and part of growth is learning to open it again when something healthy, life-giving, and safe comes along. That's why discernment is such an important part of this process. Not every challenge is a threat. Not every discomfort means danger. Sometimes, the thing that feels unfamiliar is actually the thing you've been waiting for. The key is to check in with yourself. Does this feel like the old cycle in disguise? Or does this feel like the next step in my growth? I've seen people heal from years of chaos, step into peace, and then unintentionally create new chaos because they didn't know how to live without it. They mistook stillness for stagnation. They thought something was wrong because life wasn't constantly on fire anymore. This is where you have to remind yourself peace is not boring. Peace is where you rebuild. Peace is where you learn how to live without bracing for the next blow. When your healing becomes your boundary, you also stop apologizing for protecting it. You stop making your needs small so that others can feel comfortable. You stop letting people convince you that you're too sensitive just because you won't tolerate what you used to. You stop bargaining with yourself about whether it's worth letting someone cross the line. Just this once. And maybe most importantly, you stop needing other people to understand your boundaries in order to honor them. Some will understand, some won't. But either way, your commitment to yourself remains the same. This isn't about building an armor so thick that nothing gets through. It's about building a filter that allows love, respect, and kindness in, and keeps harm, manipulation, and chaos out. And that's a skill you'll refine over time. You'll get it wrong sometimes. You'll open the gate to something you shouldn't have, and you'll have to close it again. But the difference is, now you'll notice sooner. You'll recover faster. You'll know how to protect yourself without having to rebuild from the ground up every time. That's the beauty of letting your healing become your boundary. It turns protection into a way of life, not just a reaction to crisis. It means you're not just ending a painful cycle once, you're ending its ability to return. And that's the real victory. Not just surviving what hurt you, but refusing to live in its shadow ever again. So when the old patterns try to knock on your door, remember you don't live there anymore. You've moved. You've rebuilt. And the gate stays closed to anything that doesn't honor the life you fought so hard to create. Because your healing is not fragile. It's sacred. And sacred things are worth protecting. Painful cycles don't end because we find the perfect moment. the perfect courage, or the perfect plan. They end because one day we decide our healing is worth more than our history. And when you finally walk away from what hurt you, you're not just ending a cycle. You're starting a story you've never lived before. And that story, my friends, is yours to write.